This is the first booster set without a new ride line in it in actually 2 years. The last time was the 4th set of original D era. Today we are going to take a look at the brand new set release that is coming out here in Japan actually tomorrow, which is of course Divine's set 6, Generation Dragenesis. We learn new words by playing Vanguard in these streets. But this is a very unique set because unlike usual or unlike these last couple of years really, they're actually not putting in a new ride line and actually just supporting a bunch of old ones while printing some cool new tools for a bunch of other decks too. And I guess also just like bringing back new support for other ride lines, like bringing back things like Gendiva through a masked form and stuff like that. So as usual, I will give you my first impressions in today's video, going over all of the nations. And I think the overall maybe community excitement for this set might not be as high, but I personally am really excited about it. So I'm actually very looking forward to getting into this video. Without any further ado, let's get into it and take a look at what this brand new set has in store. We will break things down one by one with the nations, but there are a couple of nationless cards that I do want to take a look at first. The main one, of course, being the Fire Regulus itself, the Fire Legalis. I mean, just look at it, right? They even put fire in the name. So it's one of the 2 generic things I want to talk about in this set. The other one is the new front triggers that I'll also kind of break down before we get into the nations. But the Fire Regulus, we can even pop up the full thing, is of course a Regulus piece, so you can still only play 1 per deck, and of course you can only use it once per game. It has a continuous effect that says you cannot play this, so that means you have to basically use this effect in different ways. And that way is by banishing it from the drop or hand. You look at the top 5 cards of your deck, you choose up to 1, reveal it, and if you did not, you shuffle your deck and draw 1. So even if you don't find anything that this asks for, you still draw a card, so it doesn't, you still generate advantage. And if you did reveal a card, then you do something based on what you revealed. So if the card you revealed is a glitter, then you add that card to your hand. So for example, like Eva, Dodowa, Thegria, or like Mikani, all their like supporting figures are also, of course, glitters. But if the card that you revealed is a card that is equal to or lower grade than your Vanguard, then you can call it to rear. An important thing to keep in mind is that even if you play this in a glitter deck and you reveal a glitter, you can technically still choose to use the second effect of calling that glitter instead. So for example, in Eva, this means you get another chance to call Obscudate off the top. Personally speaking, this card is really good. Arguably, I think might not be the best Regulus piece of all time. I do think that Ladder is amazing in shutting down certain matchups. I think Gratias Gradale is really good in giving you an extra Persona ride. And the 2 defensive Reguluses that we have, both Twin Cast as well as the Union the Sky, I think are also very good because they offer something else. But this finally gave like order-based decks that didn't really have any Regulus piece options other than the Blitz order something else now. And it's a way to dig for pieces, so especially in these more piece-reliant decks or decks like Eva that obviously will really like to call something off the top, this will definitely be played. So I do expect, we don't know the release date prices just yet as I'm recording this, but I do expect this to go for a pretty penny on release. It also doesn't have any alternate rarities. It's only available as a triple rare, no frame rares, no silver rares, it's just this. So however many you get from a case, that is all you get. There's no chance of like bumping that count with like other additional rarities or anything like that. But otherwise, I do think this card is really good. It's also the fact that, again, it banishes itself from drop, which means you can discard it for ride cost, which then immediately means that this is a card that always generates advantage. Only if you banish it from hand is it a break even, but you're not going to try to go for that. Try to find ways to discard this unless you're like, you barely survived 1 card in hand, you top deck this, and it's like, well, I guess I'm going to banish this from hand just to like get something else to attack with. But yeah, I think it's definitely a Regulus piece that is fitting of the name, the Fire Regulus. I mean, this is the thing that in the lore, Eva and Orwa, etc. are chasing after to fulfill their wishes, and I think it's definitely a very good card in promoting that idea. And so I think we'll see a lot of people experimenting with it and like putting it in different decks, but I personally, right now, I can already think of like Odium and Eva wanting to play it. I think decks that maybe aren't as rearguard reliant might not, but anything with like really strong rears, anything that isn't like too Vanguard based, would like to have it. Like even Varga is like very Vanguard based, and honestly I could see it playing this as well. I could see myself playing this. Actually, I'm not sure if I'd see myself playing this in Dayusha. I feel like in Dayusha maybe I don't, I'm calling my rears for my soul, so I don't really care about calling stuff from the top of the deck. So I think there definitely will be a lot of people trying to find ways to use this and like which decks it's actually very good in. But I definitely do recommend you pick these up if you're playing in the Japanese format already, and of course when the set comes out in English, also make sure to pick them up in English too. I wanted to record this video a bit earlier, but it ended up kind of getting to sunset, and the sun sets here at like 3:30 now because it's December. But anyway, the other, let's take the Keter one as the example. I like the Keter one a lot. So the other thing that I want to talk about that is generic is the new front trigger. So they gave us a new effect front trigger in case you missed it. I haven't been really uploading the news reveals, like wrap up videos like I used to as much. And I didn't really do like a new card discussion video prior to this either for this set. But the new front triggers, basically every single nation got them except for Lyrical for now, but Lyrical will surely get it in the next time that they're supported, either that or the next Lyrical booster. And basically these are 15k shield only. They still of course provide 10k power to your front row, but you can see they have 0 power. They're also double rare, which is also the first time we ever have a double rare effect trigger. And their effects are when retire from Guardian Circle, they go to Soul. Now, honestly, at first I was really thinking like, man, why are these 0 power? It seems pretty lame that they're 0 power. I still do think that they could have at least been 4k, like I think, you know, same as like the other effect triggers, but they chose to make them 0 power, which is like, okay. And I think it's because unlike, so like the crits gave plus 2k power, the fronts gave plus 5k shield, but they didn't actually equal into card advantage. Soul is technically card advantage, not just, you know, generating the soul itself is considered a +1 in, you know, in terms of card advantage to your board. But more importantly, the only decks that will choose to play these are the ones that use Soul to generate card advantage. So for example, if you play the Brandt Gate one in Messiah, that's an extra card you're drawing from Alter Ego skill. If you're playing the, you know, the Dark States one in Chrono Jet, that's an extra one you're drawing from the GG. If you're playing the Dark States one, I guess like in Odium, that's another card you can use to pay for the Soul to then get the triple drive. So that still equals another card. So you can kind of see that I think the decks that will choose to play this will be the ones that actually care about the Soul. And I think it's only, there's going to be quite a lot of decks that want to use these, and so I really hope that the pull rate of these is like at least 8 per case, because I can already see myself using these as like the 3 up front. I think also we're going to start to see some decks that are running 7 to 8 fronts start to be born as well. Like I don't necessarily think that these fronts will replace the old effect fronts. I think they might be used combined with them, especially decks that maybe don't care so much about like flipping crits, or decks that like, for example, like Maelstrom, I guess. I don't know if Maelstrom uses Soul that much. I'd have to like obviously check with the new cards now as well. But I'm thinking of decks that are like multi-attack based that don't necessarily care about like swinging Vanguard first and splitting those crits among your attackers. So those kind of decks where like maybe hitting the front is actually much more impactful anyway, I could see start to go towards like the 7th or 8th front line. And I think the other interesting idea is that because we now got a second effect front, I also expect us to get a second effect crit down the line, and maybe even a second effect draw too. And then it'll come down to what they want to use those for, right? This front still works when you guard with it. It doesn't have a field effect like the effect crits, but you know, the original draw triggers also, they work when you guard with them, but the crits, they work on field. So what if they printed the next effect crit as something that maybe gives you like a counter charge or something? Would that be too insane? Probably. But so I think it's cool. I think, you know, we are soon entering the 4th year of the D era. It is going to be the longest running era of Vanguard of all time at that point. And I think it's cool that we're getting, you know, more creative. I just hope these don't go for insane prices because they're only available as double rares. So those are my thoughts on the sort of generic pieces of this set for like all nations. The only other thing to talk about, of course, is the high rarities. There's also the reprints. So we'll talk about these during the nation parts themselves. High rarities, of course, you know, there's quite a few nice FFRs and like the Stride deck set cards. Some people aren't very happy about them, but I do think like the Jet, for example, looks kind of sick. But I'm very happy that, for example, like the new orders, the ones with like that actually are very storytelling, are actually available in FR. So for example, this is my current Discord profile picture, is the Die Guard with the is it Die Guard or Die Shield? I can't remember. But like the original Dimensional Robo Perfect Guard is just fishing. It's like one of my favorite arts. But then there's the Secrets, which of course is Vermilion, the Kronos Command, the Favor Neil, as well as the Transcel's Messiah, the Graham Grace, as well as the Rorowa and the Maelstrom. And then there's the 2 signed energy cards, which are the Chrono as well as the Ibuki. And then because it's G's 10th anniversary, and this is the G 10th anniversary set, all of the G main characters are also available as energy cards. They're relatively cheap from what I've seen in the pre-sale prices, except for Tokoha, of course, but all the dudes are pretty cheap. So if you're like me and you just love G and you want one of each of these, at least they won't be too expensive to pick up. And there's also the 10 copies of the Serial Messiah and Chronojet with their original arts too. So I think that is mostly all of the like generic stuff to talk about. So now we can get into the nations. So you can skip to the timestamps of whichever nation you want to see me talk about, or if you want to enjoy this as if it's like a podcast, you can just listen to the whole video. So we're going to start off with Dragon Empire, and because this set basically only supports old decks, I will be going back and forth looking at the cards of the old cards of these nations and of these decks that they support, and like what they do in combination with them. So basically Dragon Empire, each nation reprinted the Stride Fodder Grade 3 triple rares from DBT13, and Dragon Empire has a total of 3 new triple rares. So we have the Blood, we have Gandiva Masks, and the Bellicosity Dragon. The supported archetypes in this set are, of course, Vermilion, Gandiva, as well as Overlord, which is very nice. I actually picked up Overlord pieces after this card was revealed because I've never played Overlord in my life, actually. Funnily enough, I've been playing Vanguard for 13 years and I never built Overlord in my life. But then the other decks that got supported in the lower rarities, we have Koti Blaze as well as Tamayura, and we'll talk about Momoke in the Stoicheia section when we actually get to that. So there's quite a lot of decks being supported in this set alone, and we'll start off, of course, with one of the main covers of the set, of course, which is the Dragonic Kaiser Vermilion, The Blood. We were having a conversation with Kai the other day that The Blood was actually really performing super well in English in 2013, but in Japan it kind of like didn't really do anything due to the release schedules being different. But anyway, enough random old people talk. Dragonic Kaiser Vermilion, The Blood, of course, is the cross ride of the original Vermilion, and he says that as long as you have the original Vermilion in your soul during your turn, he gets plus 5k, and if your opponent is on grade 3 or greater, he gets an extra critical, and your front row rear guards get plus 5k. This is already quite strong because it doesn't have any cost. All you need to do is chuck that Vermilion into the soul, and it's pretty easy to do that even if you don't run the original Vermilion as your ride line. So that means that your Vanguard is going to be always 18k on your turn, even without Persona Ride, and all of your front row, which, you know, you're going to be doing a lot of multi-attacks because of a card called Rising Phoenix, is also going to get plus 5k pump all the time, which is very strong. Then the rest of his effects are basically the same. So we have a Soul Blast 1 that lets you choose 2 of your opponent's rearguard circles, and then when this would attack, it attacks your opponent's Vanguard and those circles at the same time in that same battle. And at the end of his attack, then if you played a normal order this turn and your opponent is on 4 or less damage, you can discard 1 to deal 1 damage to your opponent's Vanguard. So what has changed with the original Vermilion? So we're going to be going back and forth like this. Let me also zoom in on this a little bit more. So the original Vermilion, you can see here, had to pay Counterblast 1 for that attack skill. So now you just pay Soul Blast 1 to choose the multiple circles. And he also only gave 2 units plus 5k, and you had to pay a Counterblast as well, I mean, for that whole effect. And the discard 1 to deal a damage was basically the exact same. So basically you no longer pay CB, the power gain is free, he gets an extra crit for free, and he also gets to attack the circles for free too. Don't forget the order is the Eternal Thunderbolt, which basically gives your Vermilion the effect that when your opponent's rearguard is hit by this unit and would be retired from rear, you bind it instead, and if your opponent doesn't have any rearguards, your front row rearguards get plus 5k. And you can also play this from drop, which is a pretty important clause. And then one of the main strong support cards, I don't think Rising Phoenix will pop up in this, I have to actually search for it. So the D-Era Rising Phoenix says, when a card is bound during your turn by your card effect, if he's in drop and your Vanguard is in Narukami, Soul Blast 1 and call this. So what's important is that he will come out normally when your opponent's rearguard is hit, right? So you attack rear, attack with Vermilion, and then you hit one of your rears, your opponent's rears, and then of course your 2 Rising Phoenixes come out. But sometimes your opponent will just not call anything, right? And you don't have a way to hit your opponent's rears, so then you just get the plus 5k buff. But that is why we have some older cards like the Hammer Dragon that basically says he on attack, if you played an order, gets 5k, and at the end of the battle, count +1, draw a card, and he binds himself. So that counts as having been bound. So that means that your Rising Phoenix will proc as well. So there's plenty of ways to actually proc that effect, even if your opponent doesn't have a board, which is pretty good. And so you can kind of see how those cards combine with the Vermilion itself. But Vermilion also got this Kashin, this new card, looks really, really pretty actually. That basically says is if your Vanguard is in Narukami clan, this card is treated as a Narukami as well. And when placed from hand on rear, if your Vanguard is in Narukami clan, you look at the top 7 cards of your deck for a Vermilion or a Narukami clan card or the Eternal Thunderbolt order, reveal it out of your hand and shuffle your deck. And if you revealed something, you choose a card from hand and put it to soul or discard it. So this is good because this lets you, for example, like discard your Rising Phoenix, or it lets you put original Vermilion into the soul so you can immediately proc the cross-ride effect. I'm just going to call it cross-ride effect. It's for nostalgia's sake. And then the second effect is the, or I guess the third effect is the really good one in my opinion. When it attacks is a grade 2. It says if your Vanguard is a Vermilion that is a Narukami clan, grade 3 or greater, you count +1. During that battle, this gets plus 10k, and at the end of the battle, you bind this. So this is another card now in the deck that self-binds at the end of the battle that will now proc your Rising Phoenixes. This also means you can loop a lot of your Phoenixes together, which is quite strong. You can attack with like rear, like for example, it can be even be the Kashin, end of Kashin's attack. You then, call out your 2 Rising Phoenixes, and then you can attack with them, then attack with the Vermilion hits, and then you call out 2 more Rising Phoenixes if you have all 4 of them in the drop. So in terms of the cool little combos you can do with this deck, it's definitely, you can go up to 7 attacks and 6 of them are coming from your rears. So I think this being another enabler for that when your opponent doesn't actually give you anything to, bind or attack into, I think is quite good. So personally speaking, I rate the Vermilion stuff very highly, and we haven't even talked about Bellicosity. I think I want to talk about Bellicosity immediately now as well. It says, if your Vanguard's clan is just 1 clan and you don't have any G-Zone, this gains the following effects. When placed on rear, Energy Blast 3 and choose a card from hand, put it to soul and draw draw 2, and when your Vanguard attacks, for that turn, this gets plus 5k. This is amazing in Vermilion, because this means that you can call this on turn 2 and Energy Blast 3, put original Vermilion into Soul, draw 2 cards, and now next turn you ride, you already have Vermilion's Crossride effect alive. On top of that, the plus 5k when your Vanguard attacks is of course good because this doesn't care about your Vanguard's grade, so even on turn 2 the Bellicosity will gain an extra 5k, but in something like the end, of course, this is even better because this will now get plus 5k twice for each of your Vanguard attacks. So Bellicosity is definitely going to be the card that you want to be pulling, like, you know, as many of the triple rares possible, silver rares, FFRs. Like if you're buying a case, at least if I'm buying a case, I really hope to pull a lot of this because I feel like you want to use this card in both Vermilion and Overlord too. Really amazing card. I think even has the potential to be one of the best cards in this set. And then Gandiva, our third of the decks being supported in this set, not this deck, is the Masks version of Gandiva that can only be ridden after you have a Gandiva Grade 3 Vanguard. And he does say that when your opponent's rearguard is retired during your turn, you choose a card from your drop and bind it face down. And then for every card that is face down in your bind zone during your turn, your front row units get plus 2k. So he doesn't gain the crit, he just distributes the power to your front row. And then he says you can Soul Blast 1 and choose an opponent's rearguard, retire it, and if you didn't, you draw a card. So that of course procs the bind effect, and the unique effect is you choose a different name Gandiva from himself from your drop or hand, you banish it, and then you use the original act effect of that Gandiva for no cost, and for that turn this unit gets plus 1 crit. So as a reminder of what masks do, the mask was actually reprinted in this set as well. If we scroll down to all the way to the double rares at the bottom somewhere, there we go. So a Mask of Hydrogroom allows you to play it as an order to look at top 5 for either a Dragon Tree card or a Masks unit and add it to your hand. And in the drop, if you have a Vanguard that does not have masks in its name, you can ride a card with masks in its name from your hand as the cost for this card. Put this card underneath as the soul, and if your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, if you haven't Persona Ridden this turn, you activate Persona Ride. So just in case you're a newer player that wasn't around for the masks era of mask season, I guess, of last year. So what that means is that usually this guy will be coming into the field on a Persona Ride, especially if you go second, your opponent's already on grade 3, you use the mask to ride over the original Gandiva. If you don't know what Gandiva did, his original act effect says Counterboss 1, choose 5 of your opponent's rearguards with different grades from each other, reveal the top 5 cards of your deck, and retire all of the ones with the same grades as the cards revealed, shuffle deck, and if you retired 1 or more, draw a card and also bind a card face down. Keep in mind that this deck also had a grade 2 ride line that turned that CB1 effect into CB0 on the first time you use it. So you use this for free, then you would mask up and then use that effect for free again. So not only do you get a board wipe, you'd also effectively get to draw 2 cards at the same time and bind 2 cards from just this effect alone. Gandiva was one of the best decks of last year, so I think most people aren't, haven't forgotten what the cards actually do. But what you might have not noticed is that Gandiva did get support in Divines once before this. So it got Flare Blow Dragon, which is a card that basically if you call it during the main phase, if you have a Gandiva Vanguard, Counterboss 1, retire an opponent's rear. If you didn't, look at top 3 and call a grade 3 or less to rear. And the rest gets discarded, which also fills up your drop for the bind costs. But the main feature was of course Drag Ritter Dirgam. So when placed on rear, if your Vanguard was a Eugene or Gandiva, Soul Blast 1 and Energy Blast 3 to retire an opponent's rearguard, and if you didn't, you draw a card and give this unit the effect that at the end of battle your Vanguard attacked, you stand one of your front row rears. It can also be himself, and then if you played it order this turn, which Gandiva kind of always does, you get boost. So basically, the problem with this deck is that there's so many good cards that I don't know how you're going to fit everything, but just Gandiva on its own does read pretty good. Let's get back to Dragon Empire here. So in terms of what Gandiva got as support, basically this one isn't specifically Gandiva support. This is Dragon Empire Mask deck support, but Gandiva's the only one so far. This card says when you call it from anywhere, Energy Blast 3, and search your deck for the Mask order and add it to your hand. This is insanely strong. This like searches for the most important card in your deck for 3 energy, which is very strong. And then its act effect is on rearguard circle, you can Counterboss 1 and bind it. So it doesn't count towards your face down bind, this binds face up. You choose one of your rearguard circles without a Dragon Tree marker on it, put a marker on it, and then look at the top 7 cards of your deck for a Masks or Grifo Gira named card and reveal it to your hand and shuffle your deck. But when you use this effect, if you have 1 or less copies of this card in your bind zone, instead of looking at the top 7, you can search your entire deck. So basically, you have the first effect searches you your mask, the second effect searches you your Gandiva. So this card is like actually does everything just for these mask decks. They first revealed the Keter Sanctuary version of this, and honestly I was really excited at that point. I was like, oh my god, all the nations will get these? That's gonna be so hype. I started thinking about Leonor masks again. I started thinking about like, you know, Omino Gurgio, thinking about Orfist, all these other mask decks that were around last year, and then they didn't print this card for anything but Keter and Dragon Empire, and that means the old mask decks don't get the support in a mask set. Pretty disappointing. I was personally really hoping for this card to come out for those nations too. I thought it would have even made them that crazy. But anyway, the other Gandiva support, we have this rare that basically says when placed on your rearguard circle, if you have a masked 3/3 or greater Vanguard, Soul Blast 1, get 5k, and if you Soul Blasted the mask for this cost, like the order mask, then you get to retire an opponent's rearguard. Not a bad effect, but again, I think Gandiva has way too many good cards to be playing right now that I don't think you really have the space for this. And then this guy is grade 1 when placed on rear outside of battle phase. If Vanguard is a Gandiva or a Grifogira, grade 3 or greater, Soul Blast 1, look at top 7 for a Flame Scarlet, I think is like the name of the archetype, or a mask order, discard it and shuffle your deck, and then retire an opponent's rearguard. The things written on this are really good. Soul Blast 1 to top 7 search for something of the archetype, which you have a lot of, to retire something, or like to find the mask order is pretty good, but I do think that because of this card, you probably don't need it as much, so maybe it's like a budget option, which I think is also nice to have within the same set. And then basically every nation got one of these cards, which says when you guard with this, if you have a Dragon Tree marker on your rearguard circle, then for that battle, this gets the skill that after it's retired from Guardian Circle, it goes to Soul instead, and you get plus 5k shield on this when you guard with it. I don't think these cards will be played. I think they're cute, but every nation got them, and instead of giving those to every nation, they should have given this to every nation, in my opinion. So Gandiva, I think, is also like, I think it's gonna be very hard to build, but it's basically just like a sped up version of the old Gandiva. But I do think, you know, one of their best cards is still restricted to 1, and I think that as long as that card is restricted to 1, it is gonna be a little bit tough. And also you have to keep in mind that this deck originally really wanted to play Best Harvest in order to draw a card every time you retire something from your opponent's side of the field, and that is one of the things that made it very strong. But now you have to also think about, like, do you want to play the mask order to search for the mask itself? But then if you can find it from this, then you probably don't. You just want to discard the mask. So that's going to come down to how you play through that, I guess. But overall, so far, everything we're looking at for Dragon Empire has been pretty good. The last 2 archetypes before we move on to the last few generics. This is going to be a pretty long video, I think. Cody Blaze got some support, which is this Drag Ritter Nahido. So this card has the same effect as Togashirashi, I think it was the name of this old double rare. 7k grade 1 that said when discarded from hand during your turn, put this to soul. So this does the exact same thing, but this is literally a power cup version, by the way, because not only does it have that effect that card initially had, it also has another effect, which is when a unit in the same column as this unit stands by your Koti Blaze Vanguard's ability, Soul Blast 1 and stand a rearguard in the same column as this unit. So that means you can stand himself if you stand something in front of him, but if you stand him, you can also stand the thing in front of him too. Interestingly enough, if your Vanguard restands, because that's what Cody Blaze does, this can also restand too. The other support is this random little guy. When you guard with him, if your Vanguard's a Cody Blaze, he gets plus 5k shield, and when he's retired from Guardian Circle, he goes to Soul. Not really sure why they decided to print this, like the same effect. Like Cody Blaze doesn't need random cards at Soul, it needs very specific cards in Soul. And then they made this dragon, which is when placed on rear, if your Vanguard is a Cody Blaze, you choose a grade 2 or lower from hand, put it to Soul, and it gets plus 5k. The problem with this, I initially read it, I was like, oh, that's cool, you can set up your Soul for Cody Blaze, and I was like, wait, you're losing a card from hand? Like, it doesn't even like draw a card to make up for the fact that you put a card from hand to Soul. So I feel like instead of the 5k, I would have rather this like drew a card. It should have honestly drawn a card and given 5k. So I do feel like the art is cool, but it's a bit lacking. If you need a refresher, Cody Blaze basically actually has a lot of good cards. Like Kettle Blast 1, look at top 5, you call 1, put 1 to Soul, and the Valley attacked. You Soul Blast 2, if you Soul Blasted 2 different like rear guards, you stand them and give them 5k. If you Soul Blasted 2 copies of himself, you can discard a card as well to stand your Vanguard, and he gets plus 5k power, -1 drive. And this isn't like a once per turn effect, so this could do it like multiple times, right? So you could like swing, restand Vanguard, and then swing, and then restand your rears, right? So it's a pretty cool deck. Like it has a bunch of draw power, a bunch of like retire and stuff, and like you just needed more ways to set up Soul. But the card it got to set up Soul is kind of bad, so it's a little bit unfortunate. The restand guy is cool, but I really wish he helped to set up Soul a little bit more. Especially because English is missing an order for this deck too, which is like a manga promo in Japan. It's really strange it hasn't come out because Sergaon came out so fast in English. Anyway, so that's Cody Blaze, and finally Tamayura got herself an order. I personally quite like this. A lot of people do say it is just worse Broken Toys. But it basically says if you have a Tamayura Vanguard, you can play it. It is a Fox art, which is what Broken Toys is not. You put this to soul when you play it, and then you look at top 7 for a Ririmi or Rarami or a stealth that is in the Sentinel. Reveal added to your hand and shuffle your deck. So, of course, Broken Toys allows you to set up soul and draw cards and whatnot as well. But this can also find you stealths too, which of course can mean if you play like, I don't know, Forktail still. This can also find that. This can also find the grade 1 that rides up over the original Tamayura into the new Tamayura. So that's also, I think, the main reason to use this. And then in drop, when your Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, you can soul Energy Blast 3, and bind this in order to choose a different name Fox art from your drop and add it to hand. So this can get you back the defensive Fox art, or if you play the Fox art that like calls out 2 cards for Soul Blast 2, that can also be an option there as well. So I feel like even just as a one-of, you might want to play this just to like search out on turn 1. Because if I remember correctly, Tamayura's Ride Line searches out a Fox art on turn 1. Otherwise, I do think Broken Toys will probably be the one you want to play for the most part, especially like turn 2 and going afterwards. And especially having one-ofs is really good because the evolved Tamayura basically searches out Fox arts as well. So I think the card is pretty good. In terms of generic support, so we already talked about the fronts. We have not talked about like the glitter stuff. There's every nation got one of these as well, a top 5 for a glitter, as long as your Vanguard is a glitter, to reveal added to hand, and then if you did put this to soul. Tamayura doesn't really want to add the glitters to hands, I guess, Rirami, but you have so much searching for them already, you won't really want to play this. In Dragon Empire at least provides soul, so you might want that. So this, like, if any deck is playing this, it's probably going to be the Dragon Empire one. Then we got these really cute orders in this set, which all kind of like portray life on Cray, which I think is so sweet. And I think that's like something that Vanguard has been lacking this whole time, which is just like order arts actually showing lore instead of just like a unit, right? I feel like at the beginning of D, they did that a lot and then they forgot about it. Now they're doing it again. So you see these little like dragon dudes just chilling in this like yuzu bath. It's so cute. I really like it. But the order itself, it's a set order that lets you rest it to energy charge 1. Maybe in like super energy hungry decks, you might want to play this, but otherwise I don't think it's going to be played. It's just a very cute art. Then every nation got one of these. When retired by your opponent effect, you get to soul blast 1 and draw 1. I wish it did something else other than just when something happens by your opponent. These types of cards are usually never played. It's like even... like, I guess if we were in G and Denial Griffin was like Kagura was tier 0, Denial Griffin was everywhere, maybe you'd play this just to like bait your opponent into not using Denial Griffin so you don't draw a card. But I don't know, even in that, like the most best possible time for this card to be useful, even then I don't really see it being played. I think every nation got one of these. Energy Blast 3 to get boost and 5k. Actually not too bad of an effect. Having 15k boosters is quite strong, but energy is definitely used better elsewhere. This is support for bind decks. So this says if you and your opponent have a total of 5 or more bound cards in the bind zone, this gets plus 10k shield, but it's a grade 2 with 8k power, so definitely seems a little bit sus. And then this grade 1 is when it boosts, if you this turn you have energy blast at the same time 3 or more for that battle, it gets plus 5k. This is actually not too bad because on turn 1 you sometimes do just energy blast for your gun cyclers. I do wish it gained the 5k on boost and on attack, because then it'd be really cool. Like if you wanted to build like super aggro Dragon Empire, this would actually be quite good. But otherwise it's just a 13k booster, so it's not doing as much. And then this card is kind of similar. When it boosts, if your opponent Vanguard is on grade 3 or greater and they don't have any rear guards, this gets plus 10k. I think if they removed one of the clauses for this, it would be pretty insane. So like if this didn't have the grade 3 clause, imagine like turn 1 going second, your opponent rides passes, turn 1 you just bash this down, 18k boost, like confirmed damage, gets over defensives. It's really not that bad, but unfortunately it doesn't do anything until your opponent's on grade 3. So a little bit unfortunate. Maybe in a couple of years we'll get cards like that. But yeah, so that's Dragon Empire. And honestly speaking, also of course the high rarity side is very beautiful. The Tamayura order in FR of course, and the silver rares. I really like the silver rare Vermilion as well as the Gandiva here as well. The Stride Fodder grade 3s are also reprinted in silver rare as well. So overall, all the different rarities look fantastic in this set. Really want to get silver rare front triggers. This is the first time we ever had a silver rare trigger, and same goes for the orders for is this the first silver rare orders? I'm not sure about that, but because these are double rares, like even the D-Robo set order was a rare, so it only had a frame rare. So yeah, these are also very gorgeous. So silver rares again showing that they are the best thing to come since SPs, which I'm definitely quite thankful for. For the rating for Dragon Empire, honestly, everything seems pretty good to me. Like I think Bellicosity is very, very pleasant. Gandiva seems like maybe is the only point that you could kind of argue about. But otherwise, like the Vermilion support seems good, Gandiva support seems good, like everything else seems good. I'm willing to give this a 5 out of 5. 5. I don't know if it's going to be like super meta changing, but in terms of quality, it's pretty damn high. So I'm in a good mood today. I always, it being December plus tomorrow being the release day, I feel like I'm on Christmas Eve right now. I'm also ordering a Christmas tree soon, so I'm very excited. So I'm in a good mood today. I'll give it a 5 out of 5. Moving on to Dark States. This is like where the mixed bags start to come in from. So Dark States, of course, we already knew that we're going to get a new stride in Kronos Command Dragon. We knew that we're getting a new Favernil, and we also found out about Doreen the Thruster pretty early on too. And then there was a bunch of support for other decks as well. So Grand Dogma got some support. Of course, Chaos got itself in order as well. And then we got a bunch of other like more generic cards. And most importantly, they reprinted the entire Stride deck set Chronojet in this set as well. So every card, including the crest and the Mazer gear, are reprinted in the set. So they basically take up the slots of like the collab cards usually. So I think if you open a case, you'll basically get a Stride deck set out of a case as well, which is really nice because Arlim is also reprinted. So there's actually PGs in the set too. This I'm really thankful for, because when it comes for the Shiranui deck set to be reprinted, I'll be quite happy because that's a stealth PG. And also when the Luard deck set gets reprinted, that also means that we'll get Esras, which is a Shadow Paladin PG. So that's also like useful like undercover and stuff like that. But anyway, enough of that. Really cool already for them to reprint the full Stride deck set, I think. I guess we'll begin with the Kronos Command because it is, we're just talking about Chronojet. They reprinted Nocturgio as well, which is really good for Chronojet players, but also really good for Jeweled players. So should make Jet a little bit cheaper. Kronos Command itself is a new Stride that, of course, you stride by just ditching cards from hand that add up to grade 3. And it has an act effect once per turn, GB3. If you're a new player, GB3 refers to Generation Break 3, which means that you have to have 3 or more face-up cards of your G-Zone, either in your G-Zone or on your Vanguard Circle combined. So for example, you would stride into a card called Fate Rider first, and the Fate Rider is just over here. That says when it attacks, it flips a G-Unit face-up to like, put a rear guard back to deck and call another rear guard. And then at the end of the turn, your strides always go back to G-Zone. So the next turn, you can go into Kronos Command, and now you'll already be on GB3. So Kronos Command says on GB3, act, counterblast 1, return all of your opponent's rear guards to the bottom of the deck. This doesn't target, which means it gets by any like resist style effects. And you choose one of your own rear guards and give it the effect that at the end of the battle that this unit attacked, you can return it to the bottom of the deck and then search your deck for a card with grade +1 of it, call it to rear guard circle, and then for every face-up card of or copy of Kronos Command in your G-Zone, that unit gets +5k and you shuffle your deck. So this is a board wipe as well as a multi-attack enabler on your, second stride basically. And you usually are going to flip these, the Kronos commands from your Fate Riders as well. But what's really important is that this brings back the Urwatar Melum, not the Urwatar Melum, the TikTok Melum interaction from back in G. There was a card called Melum and there was a card called TikTok Worker that basically the Melum would call a card with less grade than herself, so she called a grade 0, and the TikTok would time leap the card that it boosts, which would be the Melum, into a grade 2. But they both happen at the end of the battle, so the ruling was that you could actually do both of them as long as you resolve them in the right order. So the card that you can do that with in Standard is Upstream Dragon, which is also reprinted here, that basically says when it attacks, it gets +5k as long as you're in GB1, and at the end of the battle, its cost is to put it to the bottom to call out a grade 1 to the back row. So that means that the upstream, you have to pay the cost to do it, but if you read the Kronos command, it's not a cost, it's an effect. So the important thing is that you have to resolve Upstream Dragon first to pay the cost and call the grade 1, and then the effect given by Kronos command to upstream is still on standby and you can still resolve it. But if you resolve Kronos command first, then you no longer have the option to pay for Upstream Dragon's cost anymore. So that's a very important thing. It's a bit more advanced for new Vanguard players, but I think those of you that have been around for a bit longer will find this a bit more nostalgic maybe. So what that means is that Upstream Dragon being targeted by Kronos command means that using Upstream Dragon's effect together with Kronos command will spit out a grade 1 to the back row and a grade 3 to the front row. And now it's up to you what strong grade 3 generics you want to combine that with. But so very, very cool effect. I think it's overall a nice little, it's just a multi-attack, but it also gives you a board wipe, which is really, really good. And the reason why it's stronger than a board wipe is the fact that if your opponent doesn't have any triggers on board, you're actually filling their deck with junk that isn't triggers, so you're basically undoing any deck thinning they've done. Another very cool point. The other card that Jet Goddess support is Glimmerbreath Dragon. So this was back in the day, we had these cards called Glimmerbreath clones, and they were all cards that were 9k grade 2s that would counterboss 1, soul boss 1, gain 2k power, and then do some sort of effect as long as you have the Vanguard that is like the main like G era grade 3 of that clan. So for Gear Chronicle, that was Glimmerbreath Dragon, and right now Glimmerbreath Dragon turned into a 10k grade 2. Congrats on the upgrade. That counterboss 1 as long as you have a Chronojet Crest. So not even the Chronojet Vanguard, just the Chronojet Crest. When you call this to draw 1, and if your Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, this gets plus 5k. And on GB3, when this attacks, it gets plus 10k power. This card itself is not necessarily that great because we already kind of do this with a lot of the other cards that Dark States has in its card pool, but better. I think though, this is a very good budget alternative to Ford and Reveltes, which is a dual nation card that is quite pricey, both in Japan and in English. And so I think having budget alternatives to cards like that is really, really important. So I think if you don't have the dual nation card, you definitely want to pick up Glimmerbreath. Otherwise, maybe you can skip it. Then the new Favernil. So if you don't know, Dear Days 2 is coming out in just next month, and Favernil got itself an upgrade. Looks really, really cool. The art is very sick. So his effect, it's like, I should probably pull up the original Favernil. So original Favernil says you can only have one of them in a deck, and at the beginning of your main phase, your opponent has to retire one of their own rear guards. And if you didn't ride this turn, he gets plus 10k in a crit. And when your opponent retires something during your turn, you put a card from hand to soul to draw a card. And at the amount that he attacked, if the grades of the Dark States card in your soul add up to 13 or more, you can almost 2, stand this and get drive -1. And then because you can only play one copy of this in a deck, that also means that you can't persona ride. So then you'd have this guy, Hrodis, who said in the soul at the beginning of your ride phase, if your Vanguard is a Favernil, you bind him and discard a card from hand, activate persona ride, and then at the end of turn, you cannot activate persona ride with other card effects and you cannot ride. So that gave you persona ride basically. And he also, I guess, allowed you to retire opponent's rear guards by putting stuff to himself to soul as well. So he kind of fueled himself. So the new Favernil says, if during your turn, your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, and you have the original Favernil in the soul, your front row units all get plus 10k and he gets an extra crit. So if you're going second, if you can get into this, you know, on turn 3, that'd be great, but you have to put the original into the soul somehow, and you can only run one. He does keep the start of main phase ability to choose a card from drop and put it to soul, which means that if you ditch the original Favernil for a ride cost, you can put that into the soul, I guess. And you choose an opponent's rear guard and retire it. And so he doesn't reward you for retiring anything, but he says at the end of the attack that he battled, if you have 13 or more total grades of Dark States in your soul, you can bust 2 or choose a Favernil in hand and put it to soul, stand this unit, and it loses 1 drive. So now it's CB2 or choose a card from hand, which is pretty good, but it has to be a Favernil. So either it's a copy of himself, so that way you're not persona riding as much, or it's gonna be just the original Favernil. And then when he's in the soul at the end of your turn, if your Vanguard is the original Favernil, you ride this card as rest. So basically you could still ride the original Favernil from your ride deck, and then as long as you soul charge this one, because this one you can run at 4, so as long as you soul charge this one, it comes back out. So honestly, it's not bad. It's like front row gets plus 10k, you get an extra crit, your Vanguard swings twice, 13 different grades isn't that hard to get, and then it doesn't CB as much anymore either. So overall, it's not a bad grade 3. I think in terms of like boss unit upgrades, it's actually relatively well done and it looks really cool. So I'd say it's pretty decent. And then we got Doreen the Thruster. So she's a Dark Irregulars, the first ever Dark Irregulars in the standard era. And she says that if your Vanguard is just one clan and you don't have a G zone, this unit gains the following abilities. The first one is when placed on rear, soul charge 1 and choose a card from drop and put it to soul. So she already generates 2 soul just from herself and also recycles any of your important pieces that went to the drop. And when a card is put to soul by an effect, if your Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, she gets plus 3k, not once per turn. So just her own effect gives her plus 6k, so she's already at 14k. But because the only deck in Dark States that isn't a G-Zone deck that can use her right now is Lukier. Lukier has a lot of cards that put stuff to soul from drop or hand and whatnot without necessarily soul charging. Lukier herself puts 2 cards into soul to do her own effect. Her order puts a card from rear to soul to call another one. Every single time you do that, Doreen is getting plus 3k. And I haven't tested her myself yet, but my friends that have been testing her are saying that this pushes Lukier to potentially tier 1 territory just because of this card. Like, it's actually quite ridiculous how much power gain you have, and apparently like you start hitting for like 70,000-80,000 columns. Like, sounds pretty insane to me, but I'm definitely excited to try her out myself, especially because I really love Doreen's art. So the fact that thanks to standard being able to use these like cute Dark Irregulars units that I never used because I never played Dark Irregulars now in like the other clans is really, really nice. And especially once we get like, you know, let's say like Reiji or Amon or like any of those added to standard, or like Spike Brothers or like any other non-G-Zone deck for Dark States gets added as an encounter, she will immediately be usable, and she's probably going to be pretty good in that deck too. I personally find it kind of cool that instead of going with like a Pale Moon unit, they chose a very, very famous Dark States, you know, like Dark Irregulars unit instead. So I hope they do that more often, but she's a very powerful card. Like, definitely don't sleep on Doreen. She is, she do be thrusting, that's for sure. Last two archetypes that got support, we have the Grandma. This card is actually pretty crazy. It's when placed on rear, -1, retire an opponent's rear guard. Like, no other condition, literally, like, doesn't care what deck you're playing. This is generic retire. And then until the end of your opponent's next turn, if you have a Grand Dogma or like any of your Grand Dogma named cards in your bind zone, cannot be moved outside of the bind zone by your opponent's card effects. So that way your deck is doing what it needs to do. And on Rearguard Circle and Guardian Circle, if you have Grand Dogma in your bind zone, this gets +5k power and +5k shield on both players' turns. Like, Sacrifice Glass was actually not a bad deck. It had so much retire, and it honestly like did so much with its energy too that I honestly am like expecting this to actually push it a fair bit. So looking forward to seeing what this does. I think it's actually quite strong. And then the Chaos card is probably the simplest of them all. If you're Vanguard, so it's a Blitz order that basically is a 15k Blitz order, but you can play this if you have a Chaos Vanguard, and if you have 13 or more different cards in Soul, you can play it from Soul. That is the good part. A free 15k shield that comes out. It's like basically a G Guardian with like no cost. It's 50k shield for no cost. It's crazy. And its other effect is when this card would be revealed from deck or put to Soul, this card is treated as a normal unit. So that's basically for the Chaos Ride line. So just a free 15k shield is cool, but it's definitely like nothing too flashy. Like, yeah, of course you'll play one copy of this, I guess, just because, you know, it's a good card. Maybe even a second, who knows, but free 15k shield is definitely quite good. And then we kind of get a bunch of the generics. So in terms of the effect front, in terms of Dark States, I think Jet definitely might actually be playing it. I think in general, there's quite a lot of Soul-based decks in Dark States, so this one probably might see play in quite a few decks. This might even become the front of choice compared to the original one as well. In terms of other generic options, we have this girl. She says when you guard with her, if you have 8 or more Soul, Energy Blast 3, she gets 10k shield and she goes to Soul after you guard with her. So in Dark States context, the extra Soul doesn't really hurt. This one is when your Vanguard that is grade 3 or greater attacks, you get +5. This gets +5k. And if your Vanguard attacked 2 or more times this turn, then your Vanguard can get +5k as well. In terms of Vanguards that attack twice in a turn for Dark States though, it's like Greedon, I guess, can use this, but I don't really see Greedon using this. I had to go check if time stamping attacked twice, but no, it doesn't either. So I guess it's just kind of Greedon support. This one is also the glitter support card, but I guess maybe you might want to even play this because it generates Soul and it can help you find your Mekanis if you don't have the grade 3 Mekani for like the OTK. So it's also very cool art with like the wolves and everything going on, so could see it being played. This card is if during your turn your opponent's rear guard is placed, if your opponent's on grade 3 or greater, for that turn this gets +5k. It's a grade 1 with 5k. So this is basically also, I think, Sacrifice Glass support, because you do, what is it, like force your opponent to call stuff from their drop, so it can get pretty big, I guess. Have a great year. This comes out right before the new year in Japan, a little bit after the new year in English though. Looks at top 5, chooses one, puts it to Soul and shuffles your deck. It's not good, sadly. It's a really cute art, but this basically means you lose a card from hand to play this, and also your once per turn order play just to top 5 to put something to Soul. The fact it doesn't even like give you anything to hand seems a little bit unfortunate. There's another one of those that every nation got. Soul +1 or retire by opponent's effect to draw 1. This card is when it's boosted and attacks. If you have 6 or more Soul, count +1, choose another rear guard, and this unit, that unit get +5k. Count +1 is a bit expensive. Maybe if this was like Energy Blast 3, that'd be okay. There's another grade 2 that gets 5k and boost for Energy Blast 3. And this is the, oh, this one's interesting. It's when it attacks a grade 3 or greater Vanguard, Soul Blast 3 to get 15k for the battle. If this was for the turn, this could actually kind of lead to some cool combos in premium, but sadly it's just for that battle, and it's a grade 2 with 8k power. Then this is the Dragon Tree support we talked about in the last one. It's like the defensive card. This card's kind of cool and a value boosted. If your Soul is 10 or more, put it to Soul to choose an opponent's back row rear guard and retire it. It's pretty free, honestly. It's you gain a Soul and retire an opponent's rear. Is like in some decks this will actually might see play. Having back row pop is pretty good, and it's like unconditional by grade, so it's just back row. And then this is another one of those, like if you Energy Blasted 3 or more this turn, gets 5k basically. So overall Dark States got some interesting like generic tools, nothing too crazy, I guess. but the generic cards are like they offer interesting support to different decks. I think that like the archetype support again is pretty decent, but it's maybe not as crazy. Like I think the Doreen and the Kronos Command push the nation quite a lot. The Favernil is interesting, but I'm not sure if I would say it's good. Like with Gandiva, at least for Dragon Empire, I felt like this is good. So for Favernil, I think I'm a little bit less confident, but I don't know, I'm in a good mood. But if I give out 5 out of 5 to everything, then it's a bit of a, you know, because Brandt Gate's going to be probably pretty decent. Actually, yeah, of course it will be. There's ever support. Keter is going to be pretty decent because Coco is in there. Stoicheia is going to be, I guess Roto is in there, but I'm not sure if I'll actually give it a 5. I guess I'll be a little bit harsh and give this a 4 out of 5, just because I feel like the order for chaos could have been a bit more interesting. The jet supports, while this is not a bad card, it's not a great card, leaves me a little bit to be desired. So I feel like looking at the encounter supports in Dragon Empire, it's like all of it was good, whereas and then the one like upgrade to an old deck was really good, and this one's just like okay. Oh, I guess the 2 attacking card is Favernil, huh? I now figured out what that's supposed to be used with. Okay, there we go. But still, I think I'll leave this at 4 out of 5. Moving on to Brandt Gate. This is getting very long. I think if you can already see, there's D-Robo support, there's Ever support. It's 5 out of 5. Don't even have to talk about it. But jokes aside, I really like the Brandt Gate support this set. Funnily enough, there's actually only 2 new triple rares though, because of course the Marstog is a reprint, but it's in the triple rare slot. So first things first, we have the Messiah support. Don't forget that just like Chronojet, we have the entire Messiah Stride deck set reprinted here as well, together with, of course, the Asleep Messiah, as well as the Perfect Guard, the Cosmo Wreath as well, so you can now play Cosmo Wreath in more than just this deck. They also reprinted the cards from the Stride deck set in FFR and like all the nice little rarities and all that kind of stuff. But the actual new cards for Messiah are actually both very good. First, we have the Trans Else Messiah, the Spaghetti Messiah from the original. Basically says you can stride this by discarding grades that equal or add up to 3. And then on GB3, which means you have to have face-up 3 face-up G units. When this attacks a Vanguard, you counterblast 1, unlock all of your locked cards, which means you basically restand your board, and you choose your opponent's rear guards equal to how many face-up cards in your G-zone there are and lock them. So even if you stride this on second stride, this will already lock 2 of your opponent's things. If you combine it with Alter Ego's stride skill, that's 3 that turn. And then you choose your rear guards equal to how many Transels Messiahs are face-up in your G-zone and give them plus 5k. So usually your first stride is going to be the Amnesty Messiah, which flips a G unit face-up when it attacks. So then you're going to just flip a copy of the Transels, and then you'll already have a 5k to distribute. And then even if you just keep like striding this every turn, you are gonna be able to essentially just like keep getting an extra 5k while doing this. And also locking 3 of your opponent's cards every turn is pretty good. On second stride, you can basically have 4 locked, which is also quite good. So it basically board clears your opponent as well, which is something that like doesn't seem as obvious, but don't forget that your opponent's rear guards, when they're unlocked, they or at the end of the turn when they would unlock, they get bound face down instead. So it's actually really, really good. And the fact that Stride Fodder is reprinted, it just makes Messiah much easier to build. The other Messiah support is the Lady Battler. She's really good. She's basically a combine rusher. So her second effect is in drop on GB3. So basically once you have 3 face-up G units, including when you stride the second time, because then you have 2 face-up in G-zone, 1 face-up on your Vanguard circle. When your Link Joker clan G unit would be placed on Vanguard circle, counterblast 1, call this back to rear. This is really good because also not once per turn. It's not like it doesn't care if you already have her on board or not like Maple does. She's literally combine rusher. And when she attacks on GB1, if your Vanguard is a Messiah grade 3 or greater, you choose one of your other rear guards for that turn, give it plus 5k, and at the end of the battle, she locks herself. So Messiah finally got another card that locks itself at the end of the battle, which means that it's easier to make your 5 attacks. But what's really important is that she distributes that power basically twice per turn, because first time she attacks, she gives 5k to something, locks herself, then you attack with your Vanguard after all your rears are done attacking, unlock everything, and then attack with her again and give another rear guard plus 5k again because that effect has reset. So she's really good. She basically also means that this is finally something to work against getting board wiped. This also means that if you don't have any rears to use Alter Ego's skill, you can stride, call her out first, and then use Alter Ego's effect to lock her and then lock one of your opponent's rear guards too. So this is what I mean, the difference between Jet and Messiah is like Messiah's rear guard is crazy good. Jet's rear guard was kind of just a replacement to an already good card. So Lady Battler is really, really good. The Messiah support is very strong in this set. But there is one more encounter deck. And of course, my baby, like all of my favorite decks are in this set, and that's why I decided to get a case for it. Of course, D-Robos, Dimensional Robos, not just got support, but we basically got confirmation that Dimensional Robos exist in Modern Cray, because this is a never before seen brand new Dimensional Robo that is not an encounter. So I'll talk about Die Wing first. I already made a short talking about this, but Die Wing, when placed on rear from hand, doesn't work from soul. If your Vanguard is a Dimensional Robo, you Energy Blast 3 to choose a card from your soul that is a different name from him, Dimensional Robo, call it to rear, and at the end of that turn, this will put the called unit back to soul. So that means that, I mean, basically just don't call Die Dragon. Like, as long as you call any of your like grade 1 pieces or like Die Lady, they will go back into the soul, so you can then still call them out next turn from your Die Base or from another copy of Die Wing. But Die Wing also says that as long as you have a base in your order zone, he gets plus 5k power, plus 5k shield. So he's also 5k shield as early as turn 1, basically. And if you have 3 or more bases, which is usually on turn 3, then he gets another 5k power, another 5k shield. So he's a 10k shield now and a 23k attacker, not counting the buff he would get from Dayusha. And because he's a Dimensional Robo in the name, he also gets 5k from Dayusha. It's so good. This card is peak. It's so good. The design is amazing. And also, it is available in FFR because it's a triple rare. And it is also available in the best rarity, Silver Rare, baby. Look at that. It's so nice because it's not an encounter. It's actually just completely full art. It's so good. It's so good. Definitely gonna pick up silver rares. But then the other Dimensional Robo support, technically not just Dimensional Robo support, but for now it's just you know, Dimensional Police support, is the Glory Maker. So she's a old grade 1 that she was like a special booster in the back in the day, and then she was a guard restrict in V, and now she's a guard restrict in D as well. She says if your Vanguard is just one clan and if you don't have a G zone, she gains the following effects. So for now, the only non-G zone clan in Brandt Gate is of course Dimension Police. In drop, when your grade 3 or greater Vanguard is placed, you can check if you have another copy of her on the board, and if you don't, she calls herself to back row Rearguard Circle for no cost. That's the most important part. She calls herself out for free. And then when she boosts, if your Vanguard is a grade 3 or greater for that battle, she lets you choose between 2 different guard restricts. 1 is your opponent can play blitz orders, and 2 is your opponent, when they would guard from hand, has to guard with 2 or more at the same time. And at the end of the battle, if you use that effect, she will retire. But that's fine because she's gonna come back next turn anyway. You have to keep in mind that the Yusha deck was basically spawning 2 rear guards from the die base every turn, because you use like 1 or 2 die bases to energy charge and fill up your soul from your drop zone, and then you use 2 die bases if you have 4 set basically to call out 2 of your rear guards to give effects to your Dayusha. But so now you have a Glory Maker that comes out for free, so now you're making 3 cards for free basically, and you have Die Wing that he himself makes another card, so you're making 2 from the order. Glory Maker comes out for free, and then if you call Die Wing, he makes another card, so you're getting a full board from 1 card basically. Of course, your die base has been set and it's just doing work over the course of the game, but you're basically building full boards now just for nothing, which is so good. So these 2 cards are great, but that's not all. We also have Dimensional Robo Die Trucker. Any truckers in chat? This card is actually very cool as a 1-of, and it's also a rare, which means it has a frame rare. There you go. We got the boy in here. So anyway, what does he do? He's a grade 2 that says continuous rearguard circle. Your Dimensional Robos in the same column as this unit all gain boost. Now you're thinking, oh, I don't really care about giving boost to my other rearguards, but you should, because this means that if this guy's in the front and you put Die Dragon behind him, the Die Dragon that was called from your soul gets 5k, so it's already a 15k booster, but that means you can retire the Die Dragon during your opponent's turn to use him as a shield without the risk of him getting attacked into. That is the very important part, and that's why I think this guy will be played as a 1-of, because you can just search it out from the die base and then you're chilling, right? I think all 3 cards for D-Robles are really, really good in this set, just like they were for Messiah as well. And then of course, how could I not? Eva's New Order. I already made a short, my reaction to it. This card is a dream come true. A grade 2 research that is not experiment successful. You can only play it if you have a Vanguard named Eva that is a glitter. Glitter is like a keyword basically that these units have, and it is a research set order. In the order zone once per turn, when your glitter unit is placed on a Vanguard or rearguard circle, for that turn give it 5k. So that means that your obfuscated rearguards are getting plus 5k when you call them, but only once per turn, so you have to choose which one you give that 5k too, unless you have multiples of these set. Or when your Poison in Paradise Eva would be played, you can also give her 5k too if you want to. So that's already cool, right? On turn 2, you can set this and then call an Obfuscate grade 2 and then bash with 15k on your opponent's like 8k body or whatever. But that's not all. The best part of this card is in Order Zone, Soul Blast 1 and rest this card. From your drop, choose a glitter unit, put it to the bottom of the deck. Not even glitter unit, glitter card. What this means is that now we can play, I mean, you could even play 1 Poison in Paradise, but realistically we're playing 2 Poison in Paradises because every turn you can use a Migrar, go into Poison in Paradise Eva. At the end of the turn, you ride back into the original Eva. Next turn, you just use the effect of this order, Soul Blast the Poison in Paradise, put it to the bottom of the deck, and now you can use the Migrar again to just ride that card from the bottom of the deck. This just freed up 2 deck slots for anything you want. You just need 2 Poison in Paradises now. So you're also removing the number of shieldless cards from the deck, which there were quite a lot because you're running 4 Poison in Paradise and then, you know, a bunch of your research orders that were like 7 or 8 copies as well. Now you have this amazing order that, by the way, just in case you didn't know, is also available in Frame Rare, a very, you know, familiar, you know, we've seen Frame Rare Eva orders from Blue Research Lab, but for the first time ever, dear viewers, we have, oh my god, a Silver Rare Eva card. Oh, look how beautiful it is. It's so good. The full border is completely just like, it's all up to the eye to see. You see the whole, like, you know, her kind of like sad, you know, drinking her coffee. You know, this was before Obfuscate saved her and everything. Like, the flavor text isn't there, of course. The flavor text is pretty good. She talks about how, you know, she wants Obfuscate to save her. But dude, I love this so much. It's like one of the best silver rares ever made. And this card is just amazing. I do think that you can easily play just 1, but I think as a 2 of, it's gonna be pretty good because if you have 2 set, not only do you get to recover 2 cards back to the bottom of the deck to prevent deck out, but you also get to distribute 2 instances of 5k, which means you can give like plus 10k to 1 unit, which means that one attacker is just like randomly getting like a trigger's worth of power, which I think is quite good because it's something that you have control over. So yeah, enough of me yapping about the Eva order. I won't stop if you don't stop me, and I have to stop myself in this case. The soul fronts, there will be some decks that will like them. I think Messiah 100% wants to play them. In terms of others, I'd have to really give it a think. I think they're, I'm looking back. It's been a while since a Brandt Gate deck was like top meta, actually. It's been pretty tough recently. Like, Wellstra doesn't really struggle for soul too much, so I think it's still fine to pick up. I know D-Robos that don't really want her as much as she's super cute, but I think maybe you guys can let me know in the comments as well. Her flavor text is nice. It's hi, Galaxy Dog o 2つですね. So she's literally just selling galaxy dogs. Pretty based for the glizzy goblins in the chat. Anyway, there was a little bit of armed arm support. This wolf guy. When placed on rear Soul Blast 2, choose 1 armed arms from your drop and add it to your hand. And if you add it to hand for that turn, this gets plus 5k. Pretty expensive though. Soul Blast 2, why is this not like Soul Blast 1, just add 1 card to hand? And you can retire this to choose the order that Silhouette has to put that into Order Zone from your drop. So it like doesn't contribute to your order play per turn, I guess. Does that order even see that much play? I feel like Armed Arms has like 0 tops, unfortunately. I really want people to cook with that deck because I love the art of it. So maybe one day, maybe one day. There's a lot of really cool generic support for Brandt Gate in this set too. We have this thing that says when it attacks, Energy Blast 2, discard a order card from your hand to draw 1 and get 5k for every grade of the card you discarded. So if you discard a grade 3, this becomes basically a 28k, which is pretty nice. Energy Blast 2, I guess, maybe you don't want to use it on this, but it's like, it's not bad. It cycles a card. It's like from all the generic rares from so far, it's actually not bad. The Glitter Searcher for Brandt Gate is surprisingly this like weird dragon. Don't think you're going to play it though, because all the glitters in Eva, you want to keep in deck, right? You want Obfuscate, basically, you want him to come out of the deck. Evas, you want to search out of the deck. So this probably won't see play in Eva, unfortunately, and Archetype is not a glitter. Then this guy's art is really cool. If you have 3 or more bases in the Order Zone, this gets plus 2k power, plus 5k shield. Don't think it's going to see play in neither Heroes nor Dayush, unfortunately, but the art was so cool. I wish it was more playable. One of my personal favorite cards, I use this guy as my Discord profile pick, actually, is a set order that's a grade 2. What's the name of this thing again? Deadly Ice Fishing. That's so good. So Deadly Ice Fishing is a set order that lets you Energy Blast 2 and rest this card to look at the top 3 cards cards of your deck. Find a card with grade equal to or lower than your Vanguard, reveal it. If it's a unit card, you call it to rear, and if it's a order, you add it to your hand, shuffle your deck, and if you did reveal a card for this effect, it goes to soul. I personally think this is actually not bad at all, because you have to keep in mind that this gives you a soul and also gives you a card. So it's like, it doesn't minus. You basically generate advantage because you're generating advantage by it going to soul and also a card going to your hand or to your field. Being top 3 might be a little bit hard to hit something that you want, but it's like super generic. So for a second I was like, if I played like Habitable Zone in Eva, I would maybe like set this as my second order to try to fish for like another, like I guess it's just worse blue research lab. But because it also provides soul, it seems kind of good, right? It's like it provides soul, it calls something. Would you run this in like Messiah? I can kind of see it because Messiah doesn't really play orders normally, but it generates soul, it can find you pieces. Seems actually not too bad. So honestly, I really like it, but I just love the art of it, and I'm so glad that there's a frame rare of it. Like this is all I want. I just want 4 of this in frame rare. I'm gonna like just put it by my bedstand. It's so nice. Anyway, then we have like the when retired guy. This card's kind of interesting, but also a little bit like it's in an interesting direction, but it's not fully there yet. When you guard with it, if you have a 2 or more set orders in your order zone, Energy Blast 3, and choose an attacking rear guard and give it minus 5k power. So this works against your opponent's rear guards, and it gives the minus 5k for the turn. Sadly, it only works on rear guards. If it worked on Vanguard, imagine this in like a Varga meta or something. Energy Blast 3, and it's like you just give minus 5k to an opponent's Varga. I kind of wish it scaled too. So it's like if you have 2 or more orders, then it's minus 5, but if you have like 3, it's minus 10, etc. But maybe that'd be a bit too insane in like Illida Glim or something, or like in Gravidia maybe. But it'd be cool. There could be support for that deck, right? So pretty cool design. I hope they do more of this in the future. And then every nation got one of the Energy Blast 3 get boost. And then the last few generic commons. I really like this little like blob. Sadly, just a generic 5k gainer if you Energy Blasted 3 or more this turn. This is the Dragon Tree 5k shield guy that, again, I wish we just got like the Dragon Tree double rare instead. This is another one that says if you have 2 or more set orders, gets 5k. If you have 3 or more, gets plus 10 instead. So actually not bad. It's during your turn too. So it's like on turn 2, you usually will have 2 set orders. So this would be a 13k. It's actually might not be bad if you want to build something like super aggro, and the art is pretty cool. And then this freaking Link Choker looking thing. So this unit says when it's boosted and it attacks, if you have a set order or any player has a locked card, Energy Blast 3, and then your front row units get plus 5k. It's 8k power for grade 2, but that's actually not too bad. The fact that this is like gives your whole front row plus 5k, isn't this like not too bad in like Rotovisor maybe? Like Energy Blast 3 for like plus 15k basically in terms of how much power this gives. It's pretty nice. Your Vanguard gets it too. This is a common worth holding on to. This is actually very, very good, I'd say. No wonder it's 8k power. This does a lot, honestly. It just needs to be boosted, and you have to have a locked card or a set order. So it's, I mean, basically works in every single Brandt Gate deck. So yeah, I already said at the beginning, I'll just repeat it here again. Brandt Gate, 5 out of 5, 100%, no questions asked. Like this is one of the best Brandt Gate card pools of all time, I'd say. All right, I don't want this video to hit 2 hours, so we have 2 more nations left, Keter Sanctuary and Stoicheia. Keter is pretty good too, though. There's going to be quite a bit to talk about in here and some very interesting comments as well. All right, Keter Sanctuary does have some interesting decks overall, and again, we do have one of the other masked decks in this one as well, which is Solraeron. We will bring up the old Solraeron cards when talking about it. First things first, in terms of reprints, we do have the Stridefighter and grade 3s reprinted, but this isn't really used in Luard, so it's not as great. And then for archetypes, we have Graham Grace getting a new form. We have the Solraeron getting a new form. Battle Sister Cocoa is support for all of the non-stride encounter decks in Keter Sanctuary, which there are 3 of, by the way. So here you'll get to see the potential that the other 2 nations will have down the line. We have a really good undercover card, and we also have Thegria support. And then I think there's no other big archetypes. There's just some really good generic cards for Keter this time. I guess we can begin with Graham Grace. Graham Grace basically says that your persona rides give power to your back row as well, and you Soul Blast 1 and choose a rearguard behind your Vanguard and give it the effect that it can attack from back row for that turn and gets plus 10k. And if your opponent's on grade 3 or greater, you Energy Blast 3 to basically give that rearguard a crit and also the Graham Grace a crit. So the extra crit is actually quite cool. And when your back row rearguard finishes attacking, then you can put it to Soul, and if you did at the end of the turn, you get to draw a card. So it's not bad, it's not a big upgrade, it basically does the same thing as the original Grand Grace, just looks like 10 times cooler. But I do think like distributing the crits is quite good. So I think this deck will probably like to go second quite a bit, and you'll definitely just run this Grand Grace. I don't think you're playing the original one anymore, because the original also I think had to pay CB for its cost, whereas this one is just soul and energy. So it's actually very free, and you can dedicate that counterblast to something else now instead. So I think it is a bit of an upgrade. Like it's decent, but it's really not that great. Sol Raron on the other hand, basically can only be written from Sol Raron named grade 3s. So, and you usually will ride him from the mask effect that we explained in the Dragon Empire part of the video. So check that out if you haven't already. And then once per turn, you can energy blast 3 and choose a normal unit from your hand and reveal it. You draw 1 and put the revealed card on top of your deck. So that way you stack a normal unit on top of your deck, right? You're following? And then his effect to banish a different name Sol Raron from your hand, soul, or drop is it allows you to declare either normal or trigger unit. So you declare it and then you reveal the top card of your deck. If the top card of your deck matches what you declared, for that turn, the Sol Raron gets the effect that when a unit placed by his ability attacks this turn, you set its drive to 1 and allow it to drive check once per turn. So this basically gives you a third check every turn, which isn't too bad. But then when he attacks himself, you counterblast 1, look at the top 3 cards of your deck, and choose cards equal to how many Dragon Tree markers you have and call them to rearguard circles. Doesn't have to be those rearguard circles, just rearguard circles with markers on them. And the rest go to the bottom of your deck in any order. So what's really good is that you stack a normal unit on top of your deck, but then on attack, you CB1 and look at the top 3. So the card you stacked will go down on the board. So you basically drew a card and, you know, stack the card that you're going to reuse basically. And that card might also get a drive check. So there's definitely a lot of strong cards you can use. Much like Gandiva, this broken grade 2 is also here. Energy Blast 3 on call to search for the mask. And you can counterblast 1 and bind this. So basically look at the top 7 for the mask unit, which is of course Sol Raron, or a Grifo Gita, which is the grade 10. But if you have 1 or less in this card in the bind zone, you search your whole deck instead of top 7. So basically this searches you both the mask as well as the Sol Raron masks as well. And the other card this deck got is this guy, Digue. When placed on rear outside of battle phase, if your Vanguard is Sol Raron or Grifo Gita grade 3 or greater, energy Soul Blast 1, not Energy Blast 1. Look at top 7 for a Sol Raron named card or a Mask of Hydragroom, discard it, shuffle your deck, and then look at the top card of your deck and leave it on top or bottom. This card I'm not too sure if it's like that insane, but the mask itself is pretty good. If you want to know what the old deck did, the ride line let you reveal the top card of your deck after declaring normal or trigger unit, and if it matches what you declared, you put it to your hand, and if you didn't, it goes to solar top deck. So you can like, you know, you can just say normal unit and it'll go to hand, and if it's a trigger, then you can just leave it on top. And the grade 2 basically calls himself out when you ride over him, and together with the grade 1, so the grade 1 will allow you to choose a normal unit from hand and draw a card and then put the revealed card on top. Same with like the Sol Raron main phase skill. So you get to like stack up a bunch of cards basically, but I guess you're kind of drawing into whatever you stacked at the same time. And then he basically says that when you reveal a normal unit by your Vanguard's Sol Raron's ability, he gets the skill that end of the battle he attacks, you retire him to countercharge 1. So it gives you a bit of CC. You're mostly not going to stay on this Sol Raron, you're going to like just eject into the new one as fast as possible. And then this double rare grade 3 basically also stacks something while drawing new cards. So a lot of them have that effect of like stack something and then like draw a card and then stack a normal unit on top. The Wisdom Claw I think was like one of the best cards this deck has. So when placed on rear from deck, it gets plus 5k. So this is pretty good as like a drive check target. And when placed on rear, if your Vanguard is Sol Raron, look at the top card of your deck, put top or bottom, then counterblast 1, reveal the top, can call it to an open rearguard circle if it's a unit card, and if you didn't, you can put it to soul instead. So pretty good. It basically pluses mid battle phase, which is also pretty nice. The most recent cards I think were from Divine set 2. So there was this grade 1 that was like when placed on rear, counterblast 1, look at top 5, choose 2 grade 3 or less unit cards, call them to rear, and if you call 2, you choose a card from hand, reveal it, put it on top of your deck if it's a normal unit, discard if not. So that also stacks you cards that you can call into. And then this guy is also countercharged. So as long as you reveal the normal unit for your Sol Raron's effect, you put this to soul, countercharge 1, and then if he was put on rear from deck, you draw a card as well. So yeah, like Sol Raron has been getting a lot of support ever since he got introduced, and I feel like maybe it's finally going to be decent just because of, like, it doesn't really gain much power. That's like the big issue with this deck, is that it never really had much power gain, and now the most it's getting is from the mask triggered persona, right? So I hope that's enough, but I'm not too hopeful for it, I guess. And then Kokoa, she's a generic support for all encounter decks, but she basically says that if your Vanguard is just one clan and you don't have a G-Zone, this gets the following abilities. When placed on rear, put a card from hand to soul in order to look at top 2. 1 goes to hand, rest goes on top or to soul, and if you put something to soul by this effect, she gets plus 5k 5k power. And Rearguard Guardian Circle, if your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, if your opponent has checked a drive trigger or damage trigger, then she gets plus 10k power plus 10k shield. So she's a 15k shield, she's a 18k booster slash attacker slash 23 if you use the first skill that turn as well. So the last effect is a bit, you know, trigger reliant. It depends on what your opponent is getting basically. But the first effect is really good because it sets up soul while drawing you a card essentially. So one will definitely go to hand. The other one either goes on top if it's a trigger or it goes to soul. And as we've seen from Levy Dress in the meta, putting stuff on top of deck is pretty good. But what's important is that she sets up the soul as well. So this is really good in, for example, Minerva, because you can chuck stuff to soul, set up soul for your multi-attacks. And then this is also pretty good in Majesty Lord Blaster because you can put your pieces, your blasters into the soul if you don't have them already, or like Blaster Blade the Vanguard, I guess, if you need to put that into the soul. In Phantom Blaster Overlord, this puts the Phantom Blaster Dragon into the soul as well. So in terms of like the Keter encounter decks, this actually supports them pretty well. Azel, does Azel already want anything in the soul? That's like my only question mark. Azel feels like it kind of got in this set because it didn't even get a new form, but they might be waiting to introduce Chaos Breaker before they introduce another Azel. So I think of the 3 like generic or 4 generic encounter cards, she probably is the least crazy. Oh no, isn't it 5? Because it's Bellicosity, Doreen. Oh yeah, Glory Maker, Cocoa, and the Cutlass. So out of the 5, she feels the least crazy, but she's still quite good. I think you don't have to be Doreen to be considered good. Then for Undercover, we have this grade 2, sorry. When it attacks while being boosted at the end of the battle, if your Vanguard is a grade 3 or greater Undercover, you put all the rearguards in this column to your soul to draw 1, and if you haven't countercharged this turn yet, you Energy Blast 3 to countercharge 1. If you need a reminder, Undercover does use a lot of CB because this basically calls 2 cards on attack. This searches you for Undercover / Shadow Paladin cards. You have a drive checking rearguard, but he doesn't CB at least. But I guess every turn you were CBing 2. And both of the cards going to soul is pretty good because you need to basically Soul Blast 2 for Obscurate alone to call him from Undercover Gauge, as well as to also, you know, use his drive check effect. You also were Soul Blasting 1 for Data's on attack effect. Was there any other Soul Blast? I guess not. So I do think the soul generation is also appreciated. So I mean, they basically gave you 2 of your most important resources in 1 card. So I'd say this is a very good card. The Keter Soul card I think will be played again in anything that is soul based. Could maybe see it in Minerva. Again, Luard I don't think necessarily needs it that much. Thagri I don't really see playing it either. I guess Rezael gets a little tight on soul sometimes if you don't see your nil barriers, but that's like, even that is a bit of a question mark to me right now. Definitely would have to think a little bit more about this. I think, oh, Amorta, Liel Amorta might actually want to play this just because she is always low on soul, goddamn. So yeah, but I think she does win the best art. She just like looks so good. Thagria got a new order just like all the other glitter bosses, but this one's not as great. It's basically if you have a Thagria Vanguard, it's a grade 2 normal order that you play by counterblasting 1, looks at the top 7 of your deck and finds a card with grade equal to or lower than your Vanguard and calls it to rear. And then in drop, you can Energy Blast 3 and banish this to choose a Thagria normal unit from your bind zone and add it to your hand. So this basically works with the Epee Thagria, the one from DBT11 that like binds herself to like proc Persona Ride twice in a turn. So this basically gets her back, but it also deck thins. But I don't know if you already have the CB for the CB1 to top 7. So I love the art. I think this is like one of the best Thagria arts, but I do think that maybe this effect isn't necessary. Like I think the second effect is quite good, but the top 7 might be hard to use because of the counterblast cost. Oh yeah, Soul Rare did have one more card, which is the back row rearguard circle. When your Soul Rare on attacks, if you have a Dragon Tree marker in the same column as this unit, you stand him. So that's kind of good, even if you don't like necessarily like, you just call 2 cards, like you still get restanding boosters, so it's not too bad. So we got the glitter top 5 searcher we saw in the other ones. We saw this guy back front row rearguard circle, start a battle phase, Soul Blast 1 for that turn. Your middle back row grade 3s get plus 5k power. So this is Graham Grace support. The when retire during your opponent's turn, Soul Blast 1 to draw 1 is also in here. Energy Blast 3 to get 5k, and boost is also in here. If you Energy Blast 3 or more this turn, get 5k is also in here. And the Dragon Tree marker 5k shield is in here. But then the unique commons and rares, there's quite a few of. First things first is this normal order, which is a grade 2 that says Soul Blast 1 to play this. Look at the top 3 cards of your deck, choose a unit card, call it to rear, and the rest go to bottom in any order. Not only is this card super beautiful because of like the blaster looking art, but also this is crazy. It's literally a better version of like the Angelica order, the wisdom order from set 8. Soul Blast 1, top 3, call something. This this counts as an order, so this procs Tithfault, which you need a lot of soul for that, so Tithfault based decks might want to play the new soul front. But this is really good. It deck thins while generating new cards. And it's a grade 2, so you can use it on grade 2 for like, you know, if you want a grade 2 game against Stride decks or something, if you want to just have a good turn 2 push as well. And I personally find that really interesting. Like, I think recent Vanguard, I know some people quote this as like a negative, but for me, recent Vanguard really feels like the game starts from turn 1. You're not just waiting until you're both on grade 3 and then start playing. So I feel like having more of these cool grade 2 options is honestly really awesome. So this order, I think next to the Brandt Gate one, are like two very, very strong ones. And then this card I find super interesting. I think it's designed as a Graham Grace card, but this is pretty crazy in Ultima based United Sanctuary decks in Premium. He's a grade 2 with 8k power that says when he attacks for that battle, when your opponent would guard against him from hand, they have to call cards equal to his critical or more. So if he's crit 2, your opponent has to guard with 2 cards. If he's crit 3, they have to guard with 3 cards. So if you put down 2 of this on an Ultima turn, even if you don't have like Force 2 or something, sorry, I'm speaking in Premium terms here, but there's a stride called Ultima that basically once per game lets you put 2 cards from your deck on your field and 2 cards on top of your deck, and then any triggers you check this turn get applied to your whole field. So you basically apply like double crit on 2 of him, and then he's now like a 3 crit huge attacker with like triple guard restrict. But I guess in Premium you have G guard, so it's not as impactful. In Standard, I think he's meant to be used with Graham Grace, so Graham Grace would give this an extra crit and 10k, so he'd be an 18k attacker with crit 2 that your opponent would have to put 2 cards down to guard. So it might be played in Graham Grace. I love this art. He looks like young Altmile, which I think is quite cool. And then there's this card at the end of the turn. If this turn you drive checked a trigger, this can go back to hand. I wish this had some other effect, like maybe like on call energy charge 1 or something, so at least you had a reason to play it down, because now it's just on the field just to be an 8k and then go back to hand basically, so it doesn't really feel like it really gives much of a purpose. There's also cool generic. When it boosts, if your Vanguard is a grade 3 or greater, you can give it plus 5k, and if you did at the end of the battle, it goes to soul. So generates soul basically while, you know, being a 13k booster, which is really not that bad. So that's Keter. I do think Keter was a bit more of a mixed bag compared to the other nations. Like I think Solreron, I can't confidently say it's amazing, and this one definitely feels like not as great as the other like encounter support cards, and Graham Grace isn't that fantastic either. So I think for Keter this time, I think Keter won a little bit too hard last set, so I think I'm willing to even give it a 3 out of 5. I'm gonna be a little bit more harsh on Keter. I think if we get more Keter mask units though, this card's gonna be crazy. And I think the undercover card is also really good, but aside from that, everything else seems kind of like decent. And I guess Coco is also quite good. Graham Grace, I hope I'm like underestimating. I do hope Graham Grace does end up doing a bit better than I give it credit for. And finally, we have Stoicheia, the final nation for this first impressions, or let's be real, this is basically a set breakdown. This is for the OGs. Stoicheia does have 4 triple rares, including one that is reprinted, which is the Enlarge Gold, which is really good timing because this will come out right after the Nitro Stride deck set, making that deck way cheaper to build. So definitely wait to pick these up if you haven't picked them up already, unless they're like dropping price like crazy in English, which hopefully they do. So again, there's no new ride lines in this set. The decks being supported are Rotowa, which does have a new grade 3, but you still have to run the old Rotowa ride line. Maelstrom support through 2 different cards. Misty Arc support, Stoiraja support, and I want to say that's about it. We have a few generics here as well, so let's just get into it. All right, let's get through the actual cover card of this set. Mr. Rotowa, he's actually is the face. Rotowa is very different from what he was until now. Sadly, looks like Radina doesn't show up in here, so we will go back to Dragon Empire just to talk about her. Sorry, not Radina, Momoke. Rotowa says, if your opponent's on grade 3 or greater, all of your token units get 5k power, and the effect that when your Vanguard is attacked, you can retire it to give your Vanguard plus 5k for that battle. So now instead of you having to use Rotowa's effect that could disappear from Blankmire's divine skill, this now kind of gives the tokens that effect. But I guess if you get Blankmire, this effect disappears anyway, so I guess it doesn't really make a difference. But anyway, it kind of gives the agency to the tokens instead, which I think is pretty cool. And the second effect is you can Energy Blast 3 to draw 1 and call 2 plant tokens. So that's really good. It generates a card advantage, and also units on board, which equal to shield and power, considering that all your tokens become 10Ks once your opponent's on grade 3. And the last effect is once per turn, you can choose a rear guard or a glitter from your soul and put it to the bottom of the deck. And based on the card you put to the bottom of the deck, you do an effect. So if you bot decked a Rorowa, like for example, one of your ride line cards, which would then go back to the ride deck, you choose an opponent's rearguard and bot deck it. That's pretty good removal, but keep in mind that's all you're doing with Rorowa that turn. Or if you put back Radirina to the bottom, which is of course the glitter rearguard for Rorowa, you get to search your deck or drop for a card with grade -1 of that unit card, call it to rear, and if you search your deck, you shuffle your deck. So if you put back the grade 3 Radirina, you get to call out a grade 2 anything. Doesn't have to be just Radirina. So if you put back a grade 2 Radirina, you can search out any grade 1 from your deck as well. And at this moment, I will jump to Dragon Empire real quick to show you another grade 2, which isn't a Rorowa or a Radirina, but it is support for the deck, which is Momoke. Momoke is a grade 2 that says this card cannot be called to rear outside of its own effect. And as long as this is on rearguard circle, this is treated as a Momoke named token unit. It's also treated, not just treated. So his effect is, in hand or drop, if your Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, you can retire a grade 0 Momoke token, which your grade 2 Radirina makes, to call this to rearguard circle from hand or drop. And when placed on rearguard circle during your turn, you can choose one of your other rearguards and retire it, and then choose an opponent's rearguard and retire it too. So there's already a 10k that then basically also gets plus 5k from the Rorowa because it's treated as a token, that then is also popping one of your other tokens to get, you know, pop an opponent's rear. And he says his glitter effect, the last one, is when your Radirina is in the same column as this unit, if you don't have another Momoke on the board, this can attack from the back row, and if your opponent's on grade 3 or greater, it also gets plus 10k. So this will also always be a 25k, meaning that when the grade 3 Radirina will like eat him up for her like grade 3 form, this will also contribute to the 25k power as well. Of course, the grade 0 Momoke does get bigger than that, but hey, that's still very, very strong. The only thing to keep in mind is that because he cannot be called other than by his own effect, if you play against prison and this gets imprisoned, it is actually stuck in prison forever. You cannot get it out no matter what, because this can only be called by its own effect from hand or drop. So that might not happen as much, but prison is actually pretty common in the current format because it's good into Rezael. So just keep that in mind. So Roro itself, I think I've seen a lot of people kind of talk about how it feels like a departure from the original and it doesn't feel as good. Of course, you can't use the original Rorowa with this or the evolved Rorowa from set 11 or the promo that searches it either. It just becomes its own grade 3 boss unit that like inherits some of Chronos Command's effects to bot deck your opponent's rears. I don't think it's bad though. You do still get multi-attack with the grade 3 Radirina basically. You get deck searching that I think you're mostly going for. I think you're only bot decking at times when you really have to bot deck something. Energy blasting to draw a card, a card I guess, and generate tokens is also not too bad. And I mean, you do get to, I guess you get 5 attacks because the Momoke token can attack from the back and then you make the grade 3 Radirina for your extra attack as well. So like 5 attacks and the power is relatively decent. He might not be as aggressive as he used to be. I think we'll see how the deck ends up being. I always own all the Rorowa parts, but I've never built the deck, so I'll make this a point to do now. There's also Rorowa Order, so this is the only glitter deck in this set that actually got more than just an order of support. If you have a Rorowa Vanguard, it's a grade 2 normal order that you can play. To put it to soul, look at the top 7 cards of your deck, find a glitter, reveal it, add it to your hand, and shuffle your deck. So this can search out the Rorowa himself because he is a glitter. This can search out the Momoke because that's also a glitter. This can also search out your Radirinas as well. So pretty good order just for the search. Not sure if you have better ones to play. I think the set order that Rorowa has is still better. So that kind of clashes for once per turn order play timing. So not sure if you'll be seeing that much play. I do think that might be all for the Rorowa support though. So Rorowa itself, I don't know. Feels hard to confidently say, yes, this is good. Like, it seems good, but compared to everything else, like, compared to what, like, Levy Dress is doing if you're playing the same Stoicheia, it's definitely doing a bit less. So, I think we'll see. We'll let people cook and see what they can cook up. Maelstrom, however, does seem very good. I think just like with Vermilion, we'll have to pop up the Maelstrom stuff. But basically, he's the cross-ride of original Maelstrom, and he says, during your turn, when you have a rearguard original Maelstrom or a copy of it in the soul, this gains the act abilities of that card, and for every, what was it, Blue Storm Armada order in your order zone, your front row units get plus 5k power. So if you have 2 of those orders, your front row gets plus 10k, even on turn 3 if you ride this, which means that you're basically getting a Persona Ride worth of power, including to your Vanguard. And then when your original Maelstrom attacks, for that turn, that unit gets plus 5k. And if it's the 4th or more battle of the turn, you draw 1 and retire one of your opponent's rear guards. So if you can attack with a Maelstrom on the 4th and the 5th attack, you get 2 draws, 2 retires, which is pretty damn good actually. And when your Maelstrom named unit attacks, including himself, you can rest 2 of the Blue Storm Armada orders in your order zone in order to make it so that your opponent cannot call sentinels for that battle from their hand. So they really managed to still keep the thing that makes Glory Maelstrom Glory, which is the guard restrict, in a very interesting way that works with all the cards that have existed in the deck until now. So to show you what the original Maelstrom does, the act effect that this inherits is this one. You discard a card, choose an Aqua Force or a Tear Dragon from Soul, call it to rear, and give it the effect that when it attacks, if your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, and if it's the first battle, you can almost want to stand it, and at the end of the turn, that card goes back to the Soul. Of course, we do have a lot of the good cards as well, like of course Tidal Assault, on attack, Soul Blast 1 gives 5k to your Vanguard, and end of his own battle, if it's the second battle of the turn, you can almost want to stand it. So the buff from Glory is actually very good. Wheel Assault switches around your rear guards like the original one does. The Ride Line, Teo, of course, searches your deck for the Blue Storm Armada itself. The grade 2 looks at top 7 when you ride over it for an Aqua Force or a Tear Dragon, and when he attacks himself, he gets plus 5k and on hit draw a card, so it's not as useful, but it's still the Ride Line. The order itself, though, is a set order with a Blue Storm Armada trait. The name of the order itself is Storm of Judgment. So when put into the order zone, you do all the effects below. You choose a unit with Aqua Force for its clan or Tear Dragon from drop and call it to rear, so it revives a card. And you choose a rear guard and it gets plus 5k until end of turn for each other copy of Storm of Judgment in your order zone. So that means you can give all that power to like a Tidal Assault or any other card you know is going to be restanding, and that way you're double dipping into that power because that power gain is for the turn. So basically, Glory is copying that first effect and giving 5k to your front row units just from having Maelstrom on board. Also, unlike, for some reason, Vermilion cares about your opponent being on grade 3, Maelstrom doesn't. So I don't like that. I wish they would choose one and stick with it. Maybe they're trying to design Vermilion as more mid-range, but Glory is more aggro. I don't really know. But so, with combination with the order and the Maelstrom, you get to revive up to 2 cards per turn. But the interesting thing is that from what I can tell, if you have a Maelstrom on rear and then also an original Maelstrom in Soul, I think I saw somewhere that you can use both of those effects. So you can actually like CB1 twice and revive 2 cards. Just keep in mind that Maelstrom's original effect only gives the restand on the first attack, and you do have to discard a card. So the CB1 is for the restand, but you can discard a card for each of those to, like, you know, revive something, I guess. But I guess you mostly will just do it once per turn, but it's kind of interesting. The other support Maelstrom got is the Dancing Cutlass. Even though Grand Blue is in standard, you cannot use it in Grand Blue because it says, or you can't use it in Night Rose, sorry. It says if your Vanguard is just one clan and if you don't have a G-Zone. So sadly, Night Rose, she does have a G-Zone. This gains the following effects. If you don't though, when discarded from hand during ride phase or main phase, you can Energy Blast 3 to draw a card. So that's why you might want to use multiple copies of that Maelstrom effect. And when it's in the drop, you can banish 2 copies of this from the drop to countercharge 1. So it's literally Abyssal Owl from Luard. And it's also like a gun cycler that you can ditch for ride phase or from the Maelstrom effect. So it's crazy in Maelstrom. This is like amazing support. And this will also be pretty good in any other Stoicheia encounter deck we get in the future, like Great Nature. You know, you can just ditch this for ride cost and still get the draw and stuff, still get the counter charge. So when like Great Nature or Mega Colony come out that aren't G-Zone units or like G-Zone decks, I guess, then Cutlass will also be useful in there. So it's really good just as like a generic in consideration of that, much like Doreen the Thruster. And then Maelstrom got another card of support. So I guess same as Vermilion, definitely got a lot, which is the Idikrinis. If you have an Aqua Force clan Vanguard, this card is treated as an Aqua Force. And when he's placed on a rear, if your Vanguard is an Aqua Force clan, you look at the top 7 for a Maelstrom or a Blue Storm Armada card, reveal it to your hand shelf of your deck, and then you can choose a card from, and if you did reveal something, you choose a card from hand, put it to Soul, or discard it. So you can discard the Dancing Cutlass there, or you can put the original Maelstrom into the Soul for Glory's effect as well. And his other effect is when he, at the end of battle, he attacked, if your Vanguard is a Maelstrom grade 3 or greater, counterblast 1, choose a rear guard and swap positions with this unit. So you can, you know, maybe like your first attack will be himself, and then your second attack would be like the title. Because he's treated like an Aqua Force, he can be revived from the Maelstrom effect that you inherit. So overall, it's pretty good. It's like I can see him being the first attack, swap with title. Title goes in for 2, 3, and then like 4, 5 can be your Maelstroms. Either that, or it's like you can go this first, swap into title, title swings for second, then your glory swings for third, and then you swing with like your fourth attack title, fifth attack Maelstrom. So I've never really played Aqua Force in general, to be honest. I played Aqua Force when it first came out in 2013, but I haven't played since then, I want to say. So I definitely would need to practice my combos with this deck, but I'll definitely build it up. I'm glad that Maelstrom finally got good. So Maelstrom has a lot of cool support. This one's also technically a Maelstrom support. Looks really, really sick. When it attacks, Energy Blast 3, and if you have a Tier Dragon Vanguard, you can give it and this unit plus 5k, but sadly, Maelstrom already gains enough power, so it doesn't really need that card. All right, next archetype that got supported here is Mythiarch. So this card is when placed on rear. If you have a Mythiarch Vanguard, look at top 5. Find a different named Mythiarch from among them, reveal it to your hand and shuffle your deck. And if you did, you choose a card from hand and put its soul. And if your Vanguard is a Mythiarch, grade 3 or greater, this gets plus 10k shield. Mythiarch has been getting a lot of support over the last few sets. I think having another way to deck thin is pretty good. It's also very, very cute. But don't forget Mythiarch, you know, it discards your opponent's hand. It does a bunch of cool stuff. So I do expect this to see some play in the Mythiarch deck, and hopefully Mythiarch finally sees some play too. Stoicheia got a lot of support, and 2 of its cards are really good in my opinion. One of them is this one, the Affectores Puruperi. It's a very complicated name, but when your other unit in the same column as this unit is stood by your Stoicheia grade 3 or greater Vanguard's effect, so basically when you'd restand your 2 front rows, you can put this to soul, draw 1, and give a unit plus 5k. So the idea is you boost your first rearguard attack with this guy, and then when your Stoicheia restands your front row, this will go to soul, draw your card, and give the restood unit plus 5k to like get over defensives. Sounds pretty good, honestly, like actually very, very like easy to use. And then this card I think is very good. It's just a rare, which is when placed on rear, if your Vanguard is a Stoicheia grade 3 or greater, you discard 1, search your deck for a Codex card, which is the order cards for Stoicheia, reveal it and add it to your hand. So it's really good. Having confirmed search basically adds an extra 4 copies of each of them to your deck in case you don't draw one of them or don't manage to find one of them. And then you also have this bug that gets 5k every time you play a Codex order. So it can become an 18k basically. That's about it. But I think especially this card as well as this card are very good additions. The Soul front, I actually love the art of the one for Stoicheia. I do think this will see play in quite a few decks. Nyros likes Soul quite a bit. Levidrus is okay on Soul, I guess, actually, as long as you find your Levidrus. Maelstrom, I guess, doesn't really struggle on Soul too much, so it should be okay. Leonorn is usually okay as well. Like, I think Nyros in particular might want to play this as like her 3 of a front. So we'll see. Love the art. I definitely would like to use it. The Glitter Searcher, guess this can find you Persona Ride in this deck, find you extra copies of Rorowa, but still goes to Soul, so I'm not really too sure. This card's kind of cool. When your unit is attacked, you choose a token unit not being attacked and retire it and give the attacked unit plus 5k. This could be like Claudine support, or like what was the name again, the set 9 great nature looking professor guy, Granfia. There we go. This could be Granfia support, I guess. This generic order, again, I love these orders that paint a picture of something happening on Cray. It's so nice. This is actually a very good order. It lets a normal order that chooses a rear guard and gives it plus 5k for that turn for every one of your grade 1 or lower rear guards. This is really good in Leonorn because you can give this to your Luster Impact or any rear guard really, and then that will become the copy target of your Rosariums, which is really strong. I think also in like token based decks, this is pretty good. So like maybe in Claudine it'd be kind of nice. Hell, in Rorowa might be good too. Like this is actually a very good order. I think this, the Keter one, and the Brandt Gate one are like the 3 big winners of these like rare generic orders, and they all look so good. They're by far my favorites. I can't wait to get them tomorrow. There's an 18k grade 3 that says you cannot ride this and you can only call this on circles that have a token unit on them. So, I mean, it's an 18k base, I guess. Once you have it down once, it should stick there for a bit until it gets retired. Another one of those that when retired, soul +1 draw card cards. This is when your unit gets, when your rear guard gets retired by your effect during your turn, this gets plus 5k. Not once per turn, so I guess you could, maybe there would be some interesting combo to do with her. Like she could get pretty thick, I guess, just if you like retire a bunch. Wait, isn't this also Granfia support? Technically, the Granfia puts them to drop, it doesn't retire them. Does that still count? I'm not sure. Somebody in the comments can let me know. I'm not a Granfia expert. Then we have the boost 5k for Energy Blast 3 one, the 5k if you Energy Blast a 3 one, the Dragon Tree Marker 5k shield one, and then finally the last common is this Tomatillo that Energy Blast 2 and rest itself to give a unit plus 10k for the turn. It's not too bad, I guess, but not exactly great use of energy. And of course, the beautiful order in Frame Rare. And so that is it. That is Stoicheia. I think Stoicheia itself, Maelstrom stuff looks really good. Rorowa seems a bit questionable, and the Stoicheia stuff looks really good. So I'm willing to give Stoicheia a 4 out of 5 with some high expectations for Rorowa. So I hope you are fine with that rating. But anyway, I'm not sure what the final video has ended up being, but the raw footage for this is now at 2 hours. So I hope you've enjoyed my first thoughts and discussion of the set 6 that has been revealed in its full entirety and will be out tomorrow here in Japan at the time of recording. I hope you can rewatch this when the English release is coming up as well to know my thoughts on the cards. It might be a fun way to look back on like which of my statements aged well and which ones didn't. I will be opening a case of this on stream tomorrow actually, so you guys can tune into that and see what I pull. Very excited. Some people don't really expect too much of this set, but for me it supports a lot of my favorite decks, so I'm pretty happy. And there's also the G 10th anniversary set, plus it's Christmas, so it always feels good. But anyway, if you liked this video, make sure you give it a like, and if you haven't already, please do subscribe. But otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.